What's up, hockey fans? Welcome to the Wraparound, brought to you by the Hockey News. I am your host, Emma Lingen, and I am joined by the wonderful Michael Agello here today on today's show. We are coming at you to talk about all the latest and greatest topics and storylines from around the NHL in bite-sized portions. And before we do get into all of it, do want to remind you that for over 75 years, the Hockey News has been the ultimate hockey fix. Now get 12 issues delivered straight to you, packed with stories, stats, and a bonus gift issue to kick things off. Head over to thn.com and get in on the action. All right, Mike, we got to start off by talking about the Tampa Bay Lightning. I mean, these guys have been absolutely on fire. They've won 8 games in a row. They've averaged a league best 4.75 goals per game during that stretch. They're now at the top of the Atlantic Division standings. They've got a 26-13-3 record. And worth noting that they've done it all without the help of Victor Hedman and Ryan McDonagh in their lineup, as they've both been out with injuries. So, do you think the Lightning should be the favorites to come out of the East in the playoffs this year, or is it still a little too early to tell?
I think it's a little too early to tell. I mean, I think the narrative of the NHL season right now is if you win 5-6 games in a row, you'll be in a playoff spot and maybe even at atop the division. And if you do the opposite, you're going to be in the bottom of the conference. I mean, they're red hot right now. And I think, as you said, the most impressive thing is they've done it without Hedman, who's been out with, I think it was an elbow injury for about a month, and McDonagh, who's their rock on the blue line. I mean, J.J. Moser, who just earned a contract extension from them, is a plus 32 right now. Then you wonder why they signed him to an extension. But if you look at them right now, they're getting consistent offense from Kucherov. Brandon Hagel's got 20 goals. Vasilevsky is playing wonderfully right now after having a slow start. So there's all the pieces together that make them a top contender in the East. But you also have to look at the fact that the entire Eastern Conference, the best team has 55 points and the worst team has 43. So I don't know if you can consider it competitive balance or parity or mediocrity, but right now they're sort of the best of a not bad lot, but best of a really weird situation going on in the NHL right now.
Yeah, kind of the best for right now, at least, could change, like you said, at the drop of a hat. And it seems like we have seen that happen quite a bit already this season. Of course, I'm sure the condensed schedule with the Olympics probably has a lot to do with that. Another team that I want to talk about, of course, having one of their best starts in the last 15 years is the Detroit Red Wings. So they're 25-15-4. They're now second in the Atlantic Division behind Tampa. So again, I'll ask, do you think it's safe to say that the Yzerplan rebuild is finally working with this hot start? Or do you have any concerns about what the Wings are doing and their playoff hopes? And, could that change in the second half of the season?
The Detroit Red Wings defy logic. They are a negative goal differential in a playoff spot, -5. Their 2 goaltenders both have save percentages under 900. They're doing it mostly on the offense of Dylan Larkin and Alex DeBrincat. They're not particularly great defensively. They seem to, when they lose a game, they lose it by leaps and bounds, and then they win the close games. Hey, that's a winning formula. If you can get that, be my guest. But I'm skeptical whether it's manageable and they can have that carry forward in the second half of the season. I mean, I can only use like the examples of like games that they played against Toronto where they won one game in overtime when they won the other 2 games by 1 goal. They're winning close games. That is a winning formula in a very tight Eastern Conference. But I don't know whether they can continue this. And I think other teams who are starting to sort of wake up right now in the Eastern Conference could conceivably catch them in the second half.
Well, and like you mentioned, I mean, this is a phenomenon that's happening not only in the Eastern Conference, but also in the West. You've got the Seattle Kraken, who are 8-1-1 in their last 10 games. They're now just 1 point back of the Oilers and the Golden Knights for the lead in the Pacific Division. So this is a team in Seattle that's scored the fifth most goals per game during that 10-game stretch. They've given up just 1.88 goals against per game, dating back to December 21st. So a lot of that defensive strength, I think, has to do with Philip Grubauer, who's been really solid for them. He's given up just 4 goals in his last 4 starts, 926 save percentage on the season this year. So again, the Kraken, do you think they have a legitimate chance at competing in this division, as I mentioned, which has previously been so top heavy with teams like Edmonton and Vegas? Or, and do you think that Grubauer, and then add Joey Daccord in there as well, as, do you think they could be one of the top tandems in the league?
Well, if Grubauer is playing the way he's playing right now, yeah, because Decord has been their de facto starter the last couple seasons. As you said, Grubauer's save percentage of 926 is nothing to sneeze at, and it seems to be their spike seems to have gone hand in hand with the departure of Mason Marchment. Not to say that Mason Marchment was the cause of it, but he wasn't playing very well there. He gets traded to Columbus. He's playing pretty well in Columbus. I think he's injured now, but he played well when he was healthy, and they've seemed to spike. But again, the West has become like the East. You look at the standings, and the Kraken have 47 points, 20-14-7, and they're tied with San Jose. LA is 1 point behind them. Anaheim's 2 points behind them. You get the picture here. It is so tightly compacted that one loss and you're out of the playoffs. So it's probably going to be like that for a while, and then maybe it separates after the Olympic break. But right now, anybody who plays well for a short stretch seems to be in a playoff scenario.
Well, and then kind of, the other side of that coin, I think, is you lose enough games and suddenly there's a lot of doubts about, can they make it into the playoffs? Are they going to fall out of the race permanently? Not sure people are quite at that point yet with the Vegas Golden Knights, but I think it is worth pointing out that Vegas has lost 8 of their last 10 games. They've given up an average of 4 goals per game during that time, obviously dealing with the injury to Jack Eichel being a big part of that. But they have been struggling here of late, still in a playoff spot currently because they had such a strong start and they kind of built themselves into that position. And we've talked about it before. Every team goes through ups and downs in a season, but when you look at Vegas, this is always a team that I feel like people have looked at maybe with one eyebrow raised when it comes to their roster construction. Is this going to be sustainable? Obviously, their use of LTIR has gained quite a bit of criticism in the past. And, people have a lot of thoughts about that. But I think when you look at their roster as it's constructed currently, do you see any issues that you think would pose, a major hindrance to them as they look to push for another deep playoff run this year?
Well, going into the season, everybody took into consideration the fact that Alex Pietrangelo was not going to play the entire year, and that was a sizable hole with them. But it's a multi-system failure right now with the Vegas Golden Knights, because it's not only defensively that they have a problem, and they haven't given up a ton of goals. I think it's 129 goals, but they're not getting great goaltending. Aiden Hill was injured. Carter Hart has not played particularly well. Akira Schmid is sort of filled in. They've only scored 128 goals. They're not getting a ton of offense from they don't have a 20-goal scorer right now. Mitch Marner only has 9 goals. He's got 42 points and he's setting up people, but there's not enough, and there's not the depth of offense. And I just think that right now there are too many holes for them to fill. And you mentioned the LTIR rules. I mean, they were able to sort of, they assigned Pietrangelo as a full-time SE LTIR, meaning season ending, so they can use his cap space. But I mean, it's going to be tough with a team that has traded a ton of assets over the last few years. They don't really have the draft capital or the young prospects to go out and get a scorer or get a defenseman or get a goaltender. So they may be stuck with the team that they have right now, and it'll turn around because there's too much talent there. But right now they're sort of wallowing.
Yeah, definitely a team to keep an eye on out west. You mentioned, Mike, about we're kind of in this point in the season with the way that the schedule is constructed, that really any team that goes on a run, that goes, has a hot streak is, putting themselves in a position to be right in the playoff race. So one team I think we've got to talk about is the New York Islanders. I mean, they dominated the New Jersey Devils on Tuesday. They won 9-0, adding to a very impressive stretch of hockey that they played recently. I mean, they've got the fifth best record since December 1st. They're only 11-5-1. They've had the second best goals against per game behind only Colorado. So that's pretty good company to be in. Right now, the Islanders are second in the Metropolitan Division. They have been successful despite the fact that they've got lots of injuries that they're dealing with right now. I mean, you've got Bo Horvat, Kyle Palmieri, Alexander Romanov, Semyon Varlamov, all injured, and yet the Islanders are continuing to be successful here. So when you look at this Islanders team, Mike, do you think that they're for real? I mean, obviously they've gotten the addition of Matthew Schaefer this year, and that's been a huge boost to them. But, no one, I think, expected them to take this big of a jump. So what do you think about them? Is this sustainable? Do you think this team is for real?
I don't think any team is for real in the Eastern Conference right now because, like I said, everything is so fluid. But I mean, Matthew Schaefer is a game changer. I mean, nobody knew how good this kid really was. I mean, obviously, a lot of people did because he was the first overall pick. But coming off an ACL tear and missing most of last season, I think it was with the Erie Otters, there was always a question of whether he could translate to the NHL right away or if he needed time in junior. And I mean, he's right now the runaway winner of the Calder Trophy. He's I saw him recently play against the Maple Leafs last weekend, and he took over the game in the third period, scored the tying goal, then scored the game winner in overtime. And the list that you mentioned, Ilya Sorokin has been out about a week, I think, with an injury. So big game Dave Rittich has been their goaltender. So they're doing it shorthanded. And I mean, right now they're getting results, but I don't know how sustainable it is without Horvat, and he's supposed to be back before the Olympics. Palmieri is out for the rest of the year. Romanov was throttled into the boards by Mikko Rantanen. I don't know when he's coming back. Varlamov, I think probably. I mean, he's an older goaltender. I don't know the nature of the injury, but they brought in Rittich as a third stringer, and he's had to play some games. So right now they seem to be in that group in the top three in the Metro that can continue to sustain that, and maybe they get help with these players coming back. But I think Matthew Darche is probably going to have to add a player or two to this group before the deadline if he wants to really improve the chances of the Islanders to make the postseason.
Well, sticking with the Metro division here, I want to call out a very impressive individual performance that we saw earlier this week, and that's from Capitals forward Connor McMichael. He had 4 assists on Monday in the Caps win, 7-4 win over the Anaheim Ducks. So McMichael is a guy who's become a bigger part of the Capitals lineup over the last 2 seasons. He's 24 years old, averaging over 17 minutes a game this year. He's set to become an RFA this summer, so could be setting himself up for some interesting contract negotiations with the season that he's had. Last year, 24-25 in 82 games, he had 26 goals, 31 assists, 57 points. This season, in 44 games, it's 5 goals, 20 assists, 25 points. So really been, kind of stringing together a couple of consistent high quality seasons here. So when you look at him again being an RFA and looking at some of the RFA, contract standoffs that we've seen in recent years, what do you see the Capitals offering McMichael on his next contract?
Well, the Capitals have an advantage in the fact that John Carlson's contract is expiring at the end of this year, and that's an $8 million cap hit. And there, there are indications he wants to stay around and continue, but he's not going to be able to continue at $8 million. He'll probably have to take the John Tavares, veteran discount and maybe cut his salary in half, and that'll help the Capitals fit whatever they have to pay McMichael. Now, the one consideration here is he has 20 assists. He's been a really good playmaker for them, but he only has 5 goals. So when you're in contract negotiations, goals speak more than points. So I think they can get him probably on a bridge deal in the $4 to $4.5 million range. If they want to go, like Philadelphia did with Christian Dvorak and sign him to a longer term deal. And Dvorak is an older player. They had to keep the AAV down. They had to add a 4th and 5th year. I don't think McMichael's at that point in his career that they're going to do that. So I think if I had to guess, I think he'll probably get a 2 or 3 year deal at around $4 to $4.5 million.
Yeah, it's interesting what we're seeing with RFA negotiations now with the cap going up. Again, we've talked about it so many times, but this is uncharted territory for the NHL. And you've got players now asking for higher AAV, shorter term. I mean, we saw this standoff between the Nashville Predators and Luke Evangelista, only for them to come to an agreement on what seems like a very standard 2-year, $3 million per contract. So again, very similar type of player. He's more of a puck distributor than a scorer. So could see something similar here in terms of kind of a standoff here.
Well, I think this is the narrative that's being set around the league. I mean, I know in Buffalo with the JJ Peterka situation, he was a restricted free agent. He was the second leading scorer on the team. They wanted to get him assigned to a bridge deal like they signed Jack Quinn to. He wanted to get paid, and they weren't going to pay him. So they ended up trading him. And you could say that deal was beneficial to them because they got Josh Doan in the deal, but they didn't make the deal to get Josh Doan. They made the deal to get Michael Kesselring, a right shot defenseman, and he's played, I think, 10 games this year. So, they hit the jackpot in the sense that they got a forward who's contributing, but they're going to have to pay Josh Doan this summer. So eventually, if you're bringing in a player or you have a player that has success, they expect to get paid. And you have to hope that you have the cap space. And with the cap going up, everybody's going to have their hand out saying, pay me.
Well, that brings us to a topic which we've talked about quite a bit on the show, and that's about one player who really hasn't had success and yet is still getting paid. That would be Trent Frederic in Edmonton. Of course, we talked about it recently on the show. He signed an 8-year extension with the Oilers. That raised a lot of eyebrows when it was signed during the offseason, and it's raising even more eyebrows now when you look at the fact that he's got just 3 points in 41 games with the Oilers. Not good. He had put up 18 goals and 40 points with the Boston Bruins just 2 years ago, but now he's struggled to the point where he's only playing about 11 minutes a game with the Oilers this year. So really, really a long way to fall. I mean, again, this was a contract that already, even if he was performing well, I think that a lot of people had a lot of questions about and a lot of doubts about. But now that, this kind of seems like a worst case scenario for as much as he's been struggling in Edmonton. I mean, Mike, what do you think why do you think there's been such a massive drop off in his production? Do you think it's just one of those kinds of ups and downs that you go through in a career? Do you anticipate he'll bounce back from this, or is this just kind of who he is?
Well, there are ups and downs, and this is a way down. I mean, to go from 18 goals to 2 goals in 44 games, or 41 games, that's stunning and dazzling. He's not playing with McDavid. He's not playing with Draisaitl. He doesn't drive offense independently. I think he depends on, he plays a rough and tumble game. He fit that sort of Boston Bruin ethic, and he didn't play badly for the Oilers when they got him from the Bruins. I question the sanity of Stan Bowman to sign him to an 8-year deal. I mean, the first thing I looked at when I looked at Frederic is how old he was, because if he was 26 or under, they could buy him out at a 1/3 buyout. You'd be buying him out for the next 14 years. But it's just, I mean, right now, 3.85 million with a no move clause for another 7 years. I mean, you're lucky the cap is going up, because right now he's an albatross around their neck. And, eventually, they're going to have to pay Connor McDavid, which, again, my theory is Connor McDavid will not sign there after the 2-year extension. But if they're competitive and he wants to stay there, they're going to probably have to pay him 20%. And any sort of dead money on their cap is going to limit them from being able to pay him that money. And right now, Trent Frederic's contract is dead money.
You have to almost think good for Frederic for getting that kind of deal. I mean, good for him, of course. If someone offers you that, you take it. But it does seem, like you said, like an albatross that's really gonna. Again, you look at 3.85 with the cap going up. Doesn't sound like a lot on the surface, but oof, for 7 more years, I mean, that's just going to be really, really difficult contract for them.
It rivals the Pierre Engvall deal that Lou Lamoriello signed with the Islanders. It was a 7-year deal at $3 million. It rivals that for the biggest mistake contract of the last decade.
Yeah, definitely not another trade you want to be in the same conversation with, or another deal you want to be in the same conversation with. Want to wrap things up today here, Mike, talking about the Montreal Canadiens. So this is a team, of course, we've talked about quite a bit before, and they've been having some injury issues of their own. Back in November, they announced Kirby Dach was going to miss 4 to 6 weeks with a fractured foot. Fast forward 6 weeks, not only had yet to return, but he was actually seen walking around Bell Center in a walking boot. So it looked like he wasn't close to returning. But then, the next day or a couple days later, he ended up taking the ice in the morning with the other injured players for the Canadiens. So it's like, oh, okay, maybe he is coming back soon. But in his midseason presser, Kent Hughes said that the team was going to err on the side of caution with Dach, since the injury is on the same leg that he had the knee injury on last season. But again, Dach is a guy who we've talked about before as someone who, he struggled to stay healthy. He struggled to find consistency. He's failed to play more than 65 games in a season throughout his career. And yet the Canadiens are kind of counting on him to be their 2C, because they don't have center depth behind Nick Suzuki. So looking at, all of this information, considering the fact that Dach is set to become an RFA this summer, do you think the Canadiens are going to make an effort to bring him back, or do you think they let him go?
They may extend a qualifying offer to him, but I think their situation right now, I mean, remember, they're in the mix right now. They're in the top 3 in the Atlantic Division. They're 1 point behind Tampa Bay, who we just spoke about earlier. They're having success when I didn't expect it, because I don't think their goaltending is particularly good. They have a great offensive defenseman in Lane Hudson, and Noah Dobson is good. And you have a couple other decent blue liners and that great number 1 line. But up the middle, they're very weak. I mean, Oliver Kapanen has 14 goals. They made the acquisition of Philip Deneau for a draft pick, and he's a good 3rd or 4th line center at this time in his career. But you don't have that offensive driver playing on the second line. And if I'm Kent Hughes, I can't depend on the health of Kirby Dach. I mean, he could come back and play good for 10 to 15 games and then get hurt again, and then you're screwed. And if it's after March the 6th, then you have to go with what you have, and that's not good enough. So if they want to advance in the playoffs, I think Kent Hughes is probably going to have to trade, some of their prospects or a 1st-round pick to go out and get, whoever the center of the moment is, whether it be Nazem Kadri or there are other players out there that might be acquired. But they, I think, cannot depend on Dach to stay healthy and be effective if they want to make a run in the playoffs.
As I often like to say, hope isn't a plan. And right now, it seems like the Canadiens are doing an awful lot of hoping in terms of their roster construction. It's like, if everything works out, if everything lines up perfectly, if Dach stays healthy, if our, young goaltenders can figure it out, then we'll be cooking with gas and everything's going to be great. But again, that's a lot of hoping. It's a lot of what if, and not a lot of track record to rely on there. So definitely some work to do there, especially for a team that, as you mentioned, they kind of broke through last season, made the playoffs. That's kind of the first sign of, okay, we're not a rebuilding team anymore. This is, the opening of our window. And you need, I think, as a front office, you need to act like it. So could expect some more moves to be coming here for the Canadiens. Of course, if you want to read more about the Montreal Canadiens, the Edmonton Oilers, the Tampa Bay Lightning, Seattle Kraken, any of the teams that may or may not be in the playoff race, depending on what day it is during this NHL season, head over to the Hockey News. Of course, Hockey News has been the go-to for all things hockey since 1947. 12 issues packed with game and player insights, plus a free issue to start. It's a must-have for any fan. Head to thn.com/free and grab your subscription today. That is going to do it for today's episode of The Wraparound. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in to listen to us talking some hockey. We really do appreciate it. We will be back with an all new episode next week. For Micah Jello, I'm Emma Lingen. This is The Wraparound, and we will see you next time.